Welcome back to the Dungeon Master Academy, Mastering the Realms. I'm your host, Dungeon Master Jeff. Here on the DMA, I find awesome adventures for you to run at your very own gaming table. We get the inside scoop from the writers and creators themselves. This week's featured adventure is The Hystero by Hunter Sinclair. It's a 4-hour Dungeons & Dragons Adventure League title, APL'd at level 9. And of course, I have Hunter with me today. Hey Hunter, why don't you give us a little character backstory on yourself and how your D&D journey began?
Sure. Welcome. Well, thank you guys first for putting this on and taking the time. I'm super excited to be here. My name's Hunter, and yeah, I wrote the Hystero. And background on me, um, so I've been playing D&D for a long time, ever since basically high school, and that was a long time ago, 25, 30 years ago. Um, and I did have like kind of a gap in there for a while, and like back probably 5 years ago, I started playing again. Right before kind of COVID started, got back into it, started playing with friends and campaign kind of thing going on, and then COVID hit, played some Roll 20, got online, and then just within the last 2 years, been back in the kind of like cycle of going down to the local game store and playing, and was introduced to starting kind of Adventure League, more heavily Adventure League last year, and really just kind of fell in love with the format and the kind of running one shots and whatnot. And so, yeah, I had a lot of fun with that. And then that kind of got me into wanting to write for Adventure League as well. So, but yeah, that's my backstory with D&D anyhow.
So what comes with the adventure and where can I find it?
So it comes with everything you need to run the adventure. Number one, you can get it out in DM's Guild, and there's a couple different variations out there. One of them is the recently released the Roll 20 specific version, which will have everything you need to just import it directly into your game or start a new game with it on Roll 20. Or you can get the PDF version, which is just for your regular tabletop play, which was the original version that I wrote. And there is also a second part two of this as well, called Dark Side of Saloon, that
Okay.
carries on from the story about a year down the road, but is also out there bundled with this if you'd like to get the two for one kind of deal.
So why'd you decide to write an adventure?
I would say that originally, kind of starting back or wanting to write my own adventures was just because I wanted to like tell my own stories. I was running a lot of like hardcovers and just modules that I got out on DM's Guild, or just official modules for Adventures League, and a lot of the content was great. Like, and but I was also like kind of like stuck in the like running it the way that they had the story told, and I kind of wanted more flexibility, and I was like, I want to start telling my own stories. I had a lot of ideas and more flexibility in just writing it myself, and so I was like, I can definitely do this. I you know feel like I'm a good storyteller to begin with, and so I just felt like I could put this together. And I think a lot of people like kind of get to that point where they're like, hey, this isn't that difficult. I can do this myself. And a lot of the difficulty in doing it was really just the formatting and the following the rules and all of the stuff that you need to do to put it all together. The story part of it is just like anything else that you write. Like, I have a bit of background in like doing kind of some writing for like scripts and not like mini novels and stuff like that, short stories, and just from just my personal interest, not really anything professional.
What would you say is the adventure's influence?
Yeah, the major influence, if you start reading into the adventure at all as a DM, you'll notice it right away, is the Matrix. And that came out of the kind of concept that I came up to about what this adventure was going to be about, because I really wanted to write a kind of like more core like Prison Break, because at its core, that's what this is. It's a Prison Break type of adventure. And I was thinking about like different ways to run a prison break, and like how did they get in prison, and like those kinds of concepts. And when I was thinking about that, I was like, what came to mind is like this scenario of like what's one of like the kind of coolest like prison breaks, and I was like one that you don't realize that you're actually in. And When I thought of that, I was like, immediately Matrix came to mind. And so a lot of the concepts were pulled from that idea of like a prison for your mind and how to construct a lot of the things, and started down that path, and like things started clicking once I thought about like how I was going to incorporate that into the D&D world. Like, who's going to imprison you, who's the big bad here, right? And like mind flayers or lithids or whatever is like was like the immediate like thought of like, okay, these guys are all about psychic and mental manipulation, and just like, and like they're like the perfect evil villain here to run this. And I was like, oh well, what happens if they wake up and they're actually inside the mind flayer colony and they have to escape from that, and like that whole kind of process. And so the story kind of wrote itself as I was kind of thinking about like how it would unfold and who the players were involved and that kind of stuff. There's a lot more details that we could get into, but that's basically what the adventure's about.
Well, if it's a prison break situation, that means there's a warden. So who's the big bad evil person in this adventure?
The warden, the big bad. So it is the Elder Brain. Archalithid is his name, and it's a bit on the nose, I know the name, but it's yeah, he's the ultimate villain here. He runs the colony. He's obviously the elder brain of the colony. There's a lot of obviously mind flayers that are also involved in this as well, and some minions and so forth. But yeah, I mean, a bit of his backstory here is when I started researching this, because I was like, okay, I need to know a lot more about elder brains and mind flayers and stuff if I'm going to write this whole story. And so I started digging in and thinking about like how this was all going to work. And I realized that there was a very kind of similar scenario that was happening in Undermountain, and as part of Dungeon of the Mad Mage on like level 17, I believe, or something like that. There was this mind flayer colony that was there that was basically stealing people from Waterdeep and pulling them down there and keeping them prisoners. And so like a lot of the concepts and stuff like that were very similar to what I was already thinking about. I promise I did not steal any of the kind of concepts from that because I had never run that before. But I found a lot of the ideas, and I was like, oh, this would be a great backstory for my elder brain. Is actually after the gift basically invaded and like ran them out of the dungeon. The Eleutherid, or however you pronounce that, the ultra lithid that escaped, it eventually basically became an elder brain of his own colony, and he's brought a lot of the concepts that they were employing there, the technology and the concepts, and he improved on them. So back then, the Eleutherid were basically the ones that were in control of the minds, the dream world, if you want, of the people that they captured, and they constructed it themselves. And so this kind of plays on that a little bit, and like they want to make a more real. And so you can think about this if you wanted to parallel this to Matrix. This is like the failed versions of the Matrix before it became real. So when they actually get to the point of like, this is a viable Matrix, this is the point where instead of constructing a dream world and putting it in their brains, they actually are using the memories and the experiences of all the collective individuals that they've captured to construct the dream world themselves. And so it's a collective consciousness of all of the people that are, basically in their own experiences. Why it feels so real to them is because it is real. It is stuff that they've done before, people they've interacted with, quests they've gone on. And so you can kind of see that at the beginning of the module where like Trip is telling them like, you've already done this before, you've done it 100 times, like this is not real, etc., kind of thing. And so that's kind of the background there, is like he's kind of elevated himself now, and he's making his own colony, capturing his own prisoners, and has improved on this. And so now it doesn't have to be controlled by any individual mind flayer or even the elder brain himself. He's connected to them all, but it's them that is perpetuating the actual Hystero, which is the dream world.
I love the Matrix movies, so it's pretty easy for me to envision the NPCs. I love how it starts off by meeting Trip. I wonder who that is.
Yeah, so she's well, technically Andor is the first NPC you meet, who's the kind of fake quest giver, that gives you the initial quest, and then you're set upon this path, and you meet Trip, who yeah is the Kate Moss here, the Trinity, if you will, version. Like the version, so there's Mordecai and Trip, who obviously parallel to Morpheus and Trinity within the Matrix, but and you can play them however you want. Like I did make her a little bit quirkier and a little more spastic and stuff like that than she is in the movie. She's definitely not that in the movie, but you play them however you want. Like it, there's definitely some parallels. Even the names, the first letter and stuff like that of like the names. I wanted to have little subtle hints along the way to kind of like drop hints until you get to the point where basically you get to the red, blue, pill, blue, red potion, blue potion, and then it's like aha moment for most people of like, if they've ever seen the Matrix, they know at that point that like this is the scenario that I'm in. But
Oh, I love leaning into super cheesy stuff. Well, so I'm for sure gonna have a glitchy black cat.
yeah, and for DMs, I think like be as creative as you want, like incorporating various kind of elements that you personally like from that like concept to that experience to drop those hints, and whether you want to have little glitches and stuff like that. There's points at which I think I recommend like having people repeat lines like they didn't realize that they repeat the line, and you're like, wait, what? Why did you do that? And you're like, what are you talking about? I just told you what the deal was, and you can have that start with Andor, and just have them say the exact same line twice, and it's just like, wait, is my DM glitching or is the actual like NPC saying that, right? So, but yeah, there's lots of opportunity to kind of play that however you want.
Hey, DM Angela, what do you want to dig into with Hunter?
Let's talk about the pillars of play in this adventure.
Okay.
When talking about combat specifically, which is usually like the first pillar people think about when they're talking about D&D, aside, sometimes roleplay, but a lot of times it's combat. Involving mind flayers, which are some of my favorite monsters. How did you design the encounters in your module?
Yeah, sure. First of all, nice to meet you, DM Angelo. Yeah, so I wanted the combat to be challenging, and I think it is very challenging, depending on the kind of level of the party and the composition of the party. Mind players in general are a challenging encounter by themselves because they play heavily on intelligence, which is typically a dumb stat for a lot of characters. So unless your party is constructed mainly of wizards or artificers, they can have a lot of struggles with all the encounters in this module. So, and I've had players like be basically stunned or like for the vast majority of combat, which can be very frustrating. And so
Absolutely, that's definitely the thing that can really kind of put a damper on things is if your
yeah,
party
and
isn't
so
stunned
I
the
think as a
entire time.
DM, you have to be cognizant of that, and there are mechanisms I've put into the module to combat uh, that to a certain extent. Like not exactly nerfing, but yeah, to some extent nerfing one the Elder Brain and some of its like layer abilities, and even there's a point at which uh, there's an optional thing of like when you get to the point of disabling the crystals, the focus crystals that help kind of give the Elder Brain control over the entire
Yeah.
colony. There is a point at which that kind of backlashes on the Elder Brain, and it's essentially either disabling part of its layer ability to like protect itself with a force wall or a wall of force, or it's removing some of its legendary resistances, which I think are both things that it's going to make that encounter a little bit easier for if they fight the Elder Brain directly. The other part is there's an optional I can't remember what I call it. I think it's um, like a deity that, so the entire colony is built inside of a
A
dead
dead god.
god
Yeah.
that's in the astral sea. So I made that Ibranjul, who's like the used to be the like god of like the Underdark and
Mhm.
dungeons and so forth before I think Shar, I guess now, or whatever, whoever's currently in that. But the at the point in which you kind of get that mental backlash to the elder brain, he pops into your like the minds of the people, but not because he's still dead. Like so, but there's just a bit of influence left within the entire
Some
body of
essence.
him. Yeah, his essence. And so he can, you know, this is also optional, but he can grant them a bit of like his like power from, and it's like he does not like the fact that this mind flare colony has popped up inside of his, you know, and he can't be at rest and so forth. And so he's basically on the character side to help them in any way they can. So I had put it as like if they're in darkness or dim light, he will give them advantage on saving throws. And so that's one way of like helping them a little bit along without like making it too overpowered. It's pretty
Definitely
overpowered,
a
but
boost.
it, you know, it definitely a big boost, especially dealing with like the mind blast and so forth.
Mm-hmm.
But yeah, in general, like these are tough combat encounters, and they can run long depending on how disabled the group gets. One thing I will mention is that I wanted the Elder Brain to always be kind of like in the minds of the characters from the start of when they wake up through the entire like escape, because he has like the ability to be involved
Mm-hmm.
up to like 5 miles away. So
Mm-hmm.
like he definitely should always be in initiative whenever the players are in initiative, right? And so because he can mind link if they're incapacitated to them, and then start blasting them with psychic damage, and like there's a lot of ability to play on that. And I also want him to always just kind of be whispering kind of like stuff to them, trying to like get them to turn against their party or just flee or just come around the backside, and he'll give them some, you know, platinum, and they can just like walk out the back door kind of thing, or you know, just like play on their like insecurities or their, you know, like their greed or whatever, you know, and just kind of like has this like creepiness to it.
It's always a fun thing you can do with hyper intelligent creatures. And speaking
Yes.
on that, that'll build into kind of the next thing I want to touch on is your module is full of a lot of interesting NPCs. Some of them were touched on in the intro, such
Mm-hmm.
as Mordecai and Trip. Which were some of your favorites, and like what were your other inspirations and how you kind of presented them?
Yeah, I mean, obviously Mordecai and Trip were, you know, the inspiration for them. I already mentioned, and our there's not really a big inspiration there. He's a pretty prototypical kind of merchant type of thing, but you know, I gave him kind of like he's got his own kind of like he's not that important, honestly, because like the
Oh,
whole storyline is like fake up until that point. So I don't want to like overemphasize like he is a, you know, important piece of this whole thing.
I
The
thought that was very
idea is like
clever.
present them a quest, get them on that quest as quickly as possible so they can get off that quest and get onto the real quest.
Generic quest giver A. Perfect.
Yeah,
I thought that was really good.
yeah, I mean, basically, that's exactly what the whole thing is. Even the like blurb about like, hey, you know, like you're gonna go, you know, find some missing shipment or whatever. It's made to be very generic because that's exactly what it is. It's like it is a very generic, you know, memory of like something that they've done probably 1,000 times in real life, right? Um, my favorite and Archulith, who's the, you know, the big bad, you know, he's obviously the other NPC here. I mean, I like him a lot because I can do a lot. I can be very creative with him, and I think you can really take that and run. And he's got a kind of rich backstory about why he exists and why this whole thing is going on here. My favorite to play though is Trip. I love just kind of the introduction to like the problem that they're in and the whole quirkiness of her, and just like the fact that she just kind of pops up and she's like, you know, I play her very kind of like, uh, you know, with like a heavy kind of accent and just kind of like, hey, what, you know,
I
how's it
pictured
going?
them sitting on a rock when they meet the party, just eating like an apple or something kind of silly like that, just as like a so how's it going kind of thing. I
Yeah,
thought
it's
that was
almost
really
like,
interesting the way like she when she became like the focus in that first bit.
yeah, it actually, this. I think that yeah, anyway, so yeah, that's probably my favorite as far as like interactions and stuff like that. And you'd be as creative as you want with that. But her whole like goal is to just get them to go talk to Mordecai because like he's the one that's gonna like have the big reveal kind of deal. But I will say at the same time, like the idea is to get it is really not for them to go fight the arch druid and the displacer beast and stuff like that. That is an encounter that they can have if they're like dead set on doing it. But her goal is like, and you can tell this from some of the example dialogue that I give to the DM is that is really just to like dissuade them of like, hey, look, you've already done this. I'm willing to like watch and like see how that goes for you guys, but honestly, like you've done this before, or whatever she needs to say to kind of get them off that path is what she should say. But if they're dead set on doing it, there is like an example of like how she can help like make that go faster, and just kind of also show them the fact that certain things are not real and stuff like that. And I think Jeff had mentioned like some other possibilities on like how to run that, very kind of like different styles of doing that. But yeah, it's all kind of like make them aware of like this is not a real environment that you're in.
And speaking of the environment, your module obviously starts with them in Waterdeep and then cuts to them kind of waking up in a pod in the middle of this Elder Brain colony after the conversation with Mordecai. How did you kind of fit in all of like the themes of the areas and like the different traps and puzzles and such that you can that feature in that part of the adventure for when they get into the colony, and how did all that set up?
Yeah, so I think that so generally this is kind of goes to I think my like process for writing an adventure and like what I want to include and stuff like that. But I generally like want to try to involve like all aspects of the different pillars of play. So like mostly at equal like sometimes I like go a little heavy on one side or another, but I definitely usually I want to like include some type of puzzle or mental challenge for the players to deal with. And in this case, it's not super complicated. There's some traps and stuff like that with the crystal, the focus crystal, and the chest and the door and stuff like that. Like everything is trapped essentially. But the puzzle itself is not a complex puzzle, right? It's just a sequence of things that they have to remember, but it is something that they have to figure out a strategy on remembering because it's not easy to remember a flashing sequence of 10 things you've never seen before in the order that they appear, and you have basically 10 seconds to remember that sequence. So they have to come up with a strategy around that, and like this is another earmuff moment. But the generally what I found is like most of the time you'll after like the first or second sequence, they'll start to talk about like a strategy of like, hey, you remember the first two, and so forth, kind of thing, and divvy it up. Like that's usually the best method of solving that. And I've seen that happen multiple times. Sometimes people try to write it really fast, and generally this might be a little bit more difficult playing virtually, but I would recommend that like I've mentioned that anybody who has their character has the ability to write and scribe with the materials that they would do, as a player can also take notes and write and scribe. If they don't have that stuff, they got to just remember it. How you enforce that is up to you, but
on how to kind of like present that encounter. Kind of touching it a little bit on that. So everybody as a writer, we all have our like favorite moment of the adventure. What is your favorite moment of the adventure?
I think my favorite moment is when the characters like realize the predicament that they're actually in, or like the mental shift. Yeah, the aha moment, like the red blue pill pull, it kind of like spans a period of time, but it's basically from when Trip meets them to when they wake up in the pods. Because like that whole experience, and they're like, okay, we thought we were doing this, but now we realize we're actually in a, shit. I don't know if I can cuss, but shit ton of danger now, and we're like in the thick of it, and yeah, that whole process and like how people deal with it, and the fact that sometimes just even waking up does a lot of damage. I've had players get knocked out
Oh,
just
the
waking up
dice roll
from the
as they roll,
experience.
right?
Yeah, I mean it's a charisma save, so
Yeah,
and it goes down DC by like 3 each time.
like it
But
still
like if you're
hurt.
rolling bad, you can
Yeah,
take a lot of damage there. One after another. And like I've had several characters just like take a lot of damage and then they wake up and they're like immediate danger within like two
yeah,
rounds that
they're
they have to
red
deal with. And
barring,
so like
to quote
they
other
got to
games.
be like on their toes of like, okay, the healer's over there, we're dealing with that, and then the guys coming around, and yeah, so that's my favorite part of it. I also kind of just like seeing how they deal with the big bad, right? Like especially like the mental aspect of it and dealing with that, and like if they respond to any kind of like most players don't bite on any of the like obvious like,
Yeah,
hey, like, can I just pay you to go away? Or, why don't you
like
just go back into the
no.
pod and
Yeah.
join the colony or whatever. We'll make you a mind player. Like, nobody's actually biting on any of that. But
I've seen some players that might. I'd be interested to see like how that kind of interacted in a
yeah.
run through. Um, Speaking of kind of like the elder brain, when running through like the intro with Mordecai, he explains to them that the best way to save everybody in the colony is
Mm.
to remove the elder brain. What is the incentive for them to kind of care and rescue the prisoners along the way, as opposed to just doing what a lot of Adventure League parties will do and just beeline that goal that they were given?
Yeah. I mean, so the goal is really, yeah, so from Mordecai's perspective, he's got an ulterior motive here. Like his background, I mean, as like almost all Githyanki that that existed were originally imprisoned by the Illithid years ago, and so he has firsthand experience why he knows how these colonies are constructed and the situation that the players are going to be in, and why he's able to kind of tell that to them is because of that background. But I mean, his hatred of what the Illithid did to them is basically his like he wants to wipe the colony out. So if he can get the players to either get the Elder Brain to like flee or kill the Elder Brain, it's like two birds with one stone type of thing for him. Like one, yes, he can save all of the people, which is also important. Like he, altruistically, just like not a bad dude, but like he's in it for like getting rid of the mind flayers. Um, the saving of the prisoners, it's more of a moral dilemma for the characters, and so like whether they care about that or not is only important if it's important to them, right? So ultimately, they could just decide to like beeline for the exit, and that is a viable solution. They have to figure out a way to take down the force wall that's preventing them from leaving, but it's not super complicated or anything like that, and that is a viable solution. They don't get a lot of some of the rewards and items and stuff like that that they might get if they go the other route and stuff, but yeah, there's different avenues to succeeding at this mission, and Mordecai's not going to like leave them in the lurch if they come out and like they're alone, and they don't have any other prisoners and they didn't kill the mind player. He's not going to be very happy, but yeah, because he's not like saving them to save them, right? It's
He's
not
hoping
about
for
the
collateral damage.
yeah, it's not. He's thinking that these are capable enough individuals to execute my plan. My plan is to kill the Elder Brain or to, destroy the colony. And this is my best chance to do that. If the players like veer off of that, then like they can, but it's not. It's not what he's not freeing them just to free them because like they're great people and he wants to be friends with them.
Yeah, absolutely. So creative players, different characters, these are kind of like core aspects of why we enjoy D&D so much. What is your favorite story moment that happened as you were playing, as through playtests, or as when you've heard other people telling the story of running your module? What's something that you weren't expecting that creative players came up with for a solution or just some sort of interaction?
Um, yeah, I guess there's been a couple, but I would say so. Actually, just in the last session, so I ran this last week just to kind of refresh my memory on a lot of things. Which it's always fun running this module because I just like the kind of like getting the people to like recognize the influence of it and stuff. But anyways, I was running it and uh, Trip does this little like scene at the beginning where she like teleports to on top of a rock and kind of perches up on the rock, very kind of like bird like almost. And one of the other players did the exact same thing and just perched right next to her. It's like, yeah, you're not special. I can do that too. And it's just kind of like it's just like a little funny
Yeah.
moment. And she kind of just like twists her head and she's like, okay, yeah, all right, that's fine. And I think another one was just like how like the kind of like dumber characters deal with some of the like situations. I've had like some barbarians in particular, and this was a younger player, in the teen player kind of thing, but. He and I had him at my table a bunch before, but he just goes up to the panel and starts hitting buttons right away, and he's like, yeah, he just gets hit by psychic damage, and then he's like, I can get it the next time. And he keeps doing it.
Going, that's
And
amazing.
everybody's like freaking out because it's splashing all of them, and they're like either running away or trying to tackle him. And so just funny stuff like that that I'm like nobody's gonna just go up and start hitting buttons.
But hey, sometimes players will be players. Thank you.
Hey, DM Jeremy, what inside scoops are you looking for from Hunter?
Just have a couple questions for you. I'm sure you've run this a bunch of times, through play testing or, at the local game store or even online. And I'm curious to know, like, what are some of the problems potentially with pacing that you've run into where, have you had to, speed things up or cut things out to make things fit the way that you wanted to?
Yeah, nice to meet you by the way, Jeremy. I Pacing is probably the most problematic part of this module because there's a lot of variance, potential variance, I would say, depending on the path that the players take. Um, I would suggest, well, number one, I mentioned this already, but trying to not that you need to railroad the players in down a particular path, but making it as obvious as you can that that first combat is really not what like it's just going to waste a lot of time. So if they do get into it, try to speed it along, use some of the methods that I put in there to try to like make that a quick and just like, okay, this is not really what we're supposed to be doing kind of thing. Um, if you find yourself behind time, based off of the time allocation that I kind of put in the module, by the time you get to the first real combat, which should be in when they wake up, my suggestion is just take the flanking party out of it because it just makes that a longer combat. It doesn't suck that much more resources and it just drags that combat out a bit longer. I did this in the last run that I did, and it worked fine. The players were, I mean, the characters were already pretty like low on resources anyways because they woke up pretty injured and various other things, and so you can kind of like decide on the fly of like based off of how hard it's kind of like it's occurring to them, like how much difficulty they're already having, whether you need to add that in or not. And then basically everything, depending on if they fight the Elder Brain or not fight the Elder Brain, because there's different paths, right? They can just disable the crystals, which frees all the prisoners, and leave. I have never had anyone do that. Even if they disable all the crystals, they still want to go fight the Elder Brain. And I'm
For
like,
sure.
okay, fine. Everybody wants to do, fight the big bad, right? So, and I've had ones that just beeline straight to the Elder Brain, and they're like, screw the crystals, screw everybody. We're just going to kill the Elder Brain, and that's going to solve all of our problems, which it does. But it also makes
It
a
is.
harder combat. But like, if they do fight the Elder Brain, there's not going to be that much time left, typically for the whole exit sequence. it does make leaving easier if the Elder Brain's dead, because the rest of the mind players will also flee, which brings down the force wall and the wall force, and they can just basically walk out at that point. But um, I usually just narrate the entire ending at that point, from the perspective. I just, if there's not enough time, the whole like ship combat thing and getting away is more narrative anyways. It's not meant to be like an actual combat experience or anything like that. So I typically would just narrate the entire thing all the way till the end of the module, after the Elder Brain. So as long as you have about 10 minutes or so left at the end of the Elder Brain fight, you can just narrate the rest of it, and that's how I'll deal with that. If you have enough time, if you have 30 minutes or so, then yeah, just play it out and give them some ability to just like have a little bit more interaction with like ship to ship combat, because a lot of players who haven't played a ton of Spelljammer stuff haven't done that before, and so that might be fun for them to just shoot off a couple bolts or something like that, and it's really like it just turns them away and like, oh, okay, you did a little bit of damage, now they flee and so forth. So but yeah, those are the main places that I would mention that pacing is an issue. The other points that I'll make is with the door puzzle and the crystals. Once they figure out the problem, don't make them do it over and over and over again, right? Like, if once they figured out how to like remember the sequence, there's other doors that are locked. I generally just like say, okay, it takes about 30 seconds to open the door because you have to go through the sequence thing, and just have them roll like a intelligence check or a history check or something like that, and put like a low DC on it, that they just remembered this, able to remember the sequence that time. And if they get help or guidance or something like that, just let that kind of flow. But just something that keeps them at the door for a few seconds, but then doesn't make it like super hard for them to open it, especially getting into the Elder Brain room. Like, that's just kind of like a time suck, and also like takes them out of the mindset of like, we're going to kill something. Oh no, crap, we're gonna do the puzzle again.
No,
Like so. And then disabling the crystals, kind of the same thing. Like, once they figured out there's like a series of glyph of wording on there, and they like know how to disable those, or they're just going to smash through it, or whatever they're going to do. Generally, what I'll do is just have them just like, okay, you're just rolling to see if you like have a failure, basically. So just roll like 3 times, 5 times, whatever it is. If you're going to go around to each one, and just kind of fast track that as much as you can, because it's not adding anything to the story to like do it a bunch, and like nobody really wants to just like constantly roll for the same thing over and over again. So those are the main pacing things to be aware of.
I'm not sure if you had the chance to run this online, but you did mention that you've put together like some Roll20 tools to go alongside with it. And I'm wondering how running the puzzle pieces of the adventure, kind of are a little bit different when you do so online.
Yeah. So great question. And I have a great answer to that, because I now have the Roll20 online version that was specifically made for Roll20. Because the puzzle was originally built for a handout sheet, basically, that I would show the players, like, this is the sequence that you see. And I just showed them the actual full 10 sequence, gave them a count of 10, and then took it away and said, okay, now remember it, kind of thing. Now for Roll20, I actually have created a little animation that is the sequence of 10 glyphs. And there's actually 5 different versions of that, because each time you reset it, it's a different sequence. So you can just use that. It's all set up on its own map. You can just pull it from the DM layer to the token layer and enable it. It shows the sequence, and then hide it back on the DM layer when you're done, kind of thing. And I actually used the sequence on my phone in the last module I ran, and it worked really great. So I'm going to probably start using that in my actual like in-person play as well. So really cool. That's how I would suggest running it. There are a couple of variations, which is if the player has deep speech as one of their languages that they know, they can see the sequence of words that each symbol translates to. There's there's not a flashing sequence for that, but you can just show them the sentence that it makes. Give them 10 seconds to memorize it, and then if they can just repeat it back to you, then they open the door. So like it's a way of like rewarding a player for having a less common language that they may not otherwise have. And I think there's like a keen sensibility as well that would give them ability to like remember things more easily. Keen mind, sorry, thank you, keen mind. So like some of the less frequently taken like feats or abilities and stuff like that, I wanted to kind of like have those play a factor.
Oh, and thank you so much for all the Roll20 assets. Building Roll20 rooms can take a while sometimes and be costly. Is part 2 going to have a Roll20 kit with it? And what else is next on the writing front?
Oh, well, good question. I would say that I've got, now that I've done the Roll20 for the first Hystero, I will probably build one for the follow-up as well. Just because if somebody runs this, they may want to run the second one, and so I'll probably do that. But from a writing front, I really want to write a like a heist type of adventure. So I've got a few ideas that I'm playing around with that. I just ran through the entire Keys of the Golden Vault, which I loved. It was great. Everybody's really liked a lot of those adventures. And I wanted to write my own for that series and tie it into the Golden Vault. So I'm going to try to do that. I'm not sure how I'm going to set this in a Spelljammer setting exactly, but which is one of my complaints about Dungeon Craft in general. Is like my only real complaint is that you're forced to write in that specific setting. And while there's some flexibility there, it's still like awkward if I want to just run a traditional like adventure that happens on Toril or whatever, So but yeah, so I'm going to do that. I also wrote a like a Christmas themed or holiday themed module last year that was not AL, and I'm probably going to convert that over to an AL module so for this holiday season. So if you want to like save Kris Kringle or and fight a bunch of evil hags or
somebody's halls are getting decked.
Yes.
Any advice for adventure writers?
I would say for Dungeon Craft in particular, if you're writing for AL, join the community, join the Discord. There's a ton of like great people out there that have helped me a lot. Just and get involved in your local community as well. Like, because I feel like a lot of the feedback that I got from play testing it with folks, you can do this online as well, but like just play testing it with folks and just kind of getting their feedback, what they liked, what they didn't like, and just kind of the honest feedback from it helps kind of construct that. From a writing perspective, I just like write about what you love, write about what you know or will love, or just like, things that are interested, things that you're passionate about, because like that's what I think really brings the story to life is like when you have some kind of emotional investment in it. But yeah, I mean, like other than like structure on like how I write and like bullet pointing and like outlining and what's the big bad and what's his motivations and like that kind of stuff, like there's a lot of general like writing tips and stuff like that I'd be happy to share if anybody wants to reach out and contact me. Is
there anyone else you want to acknowledge on your journey?
Well, I'll give a shout out to my local Dragon Slayer D&D group, because they all helped quite a bit of just play testing and feedback. Also the online community, Martine and the dungeon designers and the whole AL Discord group. There's a lot of folks out there that have just been great, helping both promote and also just answering questions. It's a little bit challenging when you first get into it around the format and like, what you need to do and the rules you need to follow. And, AL in general, like has, its own rules, but Dungeon Craft in particular has its, various rules that, what you can and can't do, what kind of rewards you can and can't have, what's the limits and all that stuff. While it's pretty well documented, can be a little overwhelming, and having people out there that are able to answer those questions has been great,
And this has been awesome, Hunter. Thank you so much. Any last minute advice?
No, really just have fun with it. Lean into the theme when you're running this adventure, and really just feel the agency to be creative in how you play the NPCs. And then if you do run it, please like go out, leave me a comment on DM's Guild. I'd love to hear how it goes. I have not talked to any DMs that have actually run this adventure, and I am very eager to see how this goes because I run it, I wrote it, so I know how to run it. But I'm interested to see how it goes for somebody who is reading it. Like because there's always like a difference between interpretation of like what I wrote and what's in my mind. So.
And that's going to wrap up our Q&A portion of the Hystero by Hunter Sinclair. Thanks again, Hunter, for joining us today. And thanks Dungeon Master Jeremy and Dungeon Master Angelo for your added guidance. Next up is live gameplay of the Hystero with me as the DM. What could possibly go wrong? This is the Dungeon Master Academy, Mastering the Realms. I'm Dungeon Master Jeff. Peace out.